Joined now by our colleague Manqoba Mchunu, the South African British politician Lord Peter Hain will be giving evidence at the Zondo Commission. He's expected to speak about the UK-based PR firm Bell Pottinger and the role of international companies in state capture. What can we expect, Manqoba?
Well, of course, Des, we can expect to hear a lot from Lord Peter Hain. Of course, he's been very outspoken as far as the issue of state capture is in South Africa. I mean, having raised the issue before the House of Lords at some point, especially on the allegations that were leveled against the PR company Bell Pottinger. Of course, you'll remember that this was one of the PR companies that was believed to have been used by the Guptas, in fact, to spread or to spin the issue of state capture. So, in fact, the narrative that, Bell Pottinger is accused of having spread is the narrative of, white monopoly capital versus, black people and, their struggles in South Africa. And one of the accusations, of course, is that they had at the time assisted the Gupta family in terms of, spinning the whole state capture narrative. So, he was one of the people who was really outspoken, even speaking at the House of Lords about the issue and the role of Bell Pottinger. So we expect him really to delve deep.
Not only was he outspoken, he was such an activist, it resulted in the winding down of Bell Pottinger.
Indeed. We know, of course, that, not only did he speak only about Pottinger's role in this, he also spoke about Hogan's Law, which is an international law firm that actually had investigated Jonas Manqoba at SARS, and at the time, the allegation was that, of course, Manqoba, who was the chief executive of business and individual taxes, had, been involved in the stealing of 1.7 million rand at SARS. And of course, this company, Hogan's Law, is a company that produced a report that Tom Moyane ultimately used to clear Manqoba from the allegations that he had been facing. And so Peter Hain himself hadn't been, very outspoken in saying that, this company itself had actually protected two people that were actually complicit in state capture and actually sort of protected them in this whole thing. So he's been very outspoken about those issues. So those are some of the issues that we expect him to really delve deep into. The involvement of Hogan's Law in sort of protecting and aiding state capture, and also the role that Bell Pottinger played. But more than that, we expect him to also highlight the international complicity that was there during the state capture period, and how many of those international companies, banks and so forth simply turned a blind eye to what was happening in South Africa, and also how they also somehow indirectly aided in state capture.
Are his actions strengthened by the recent action of the US Treasury, where they announced sanctions against the Gupta brothers and Salim Esa?
Well, of course, as you recall that Peter Lord Hain is, a witness at the State Capture Commission who volunteered to give testimony. So he wasn't called by anybody. He said, I want to testify and I want to give my, my view on what was happening in South Africa. Of course, he's a man that, of course, was also very active in, his role in campaigning against apartheid back in the days.
Especially in the UK.
Especially in the UK. And is somebody that grew up here in South Africa and then moved to the UK. So he's somebody that always had a keen interest in the affairs of South Africa, so to speak. And, just speaking on that issue of the US sanctions, just last month, Desiree, he's written a letter to the British Chancellor of Exchequer asking that, the UK should follow suit with regards to what the US has done with regards to the sanctions on the Gupta brothers. So he's, even up until this day, still very active in speaking out against state capture. And in fact, he's even more active in calling for similar sanctions, for British to impose similar sanctions on the Guptas, which he believes have stolen a lot of taxpayers' money through the state capture project.
We've always known Peter Hain to be a man who doesn't hold back. But I found it particularly interesting this morning, I heard the report this morning when he was addressing media, and he says he's not going to be mentioning names. He's just going to be talking about a global system to rob South Africa of its fiscus money, and about 500 million pounds in corruption and money laundering having gone out of South Africa that was stolen from South African taxpayers. What, in your experience in covering the commission, is it frustrating when witnesses come forth and we're all so expectant of the juicy detail, and then they take the seat and they decide to be circumspect and choose their words and the things that they want to bring out and highlight.
I think it's very frustrating, not only, you know, for those who are obviously following State Capture Commission, but equally for the evidence the leaders themselves. I mean, who are hoping that, you know, they're going to get some sort of lead
can only
into
go on your
what has
revelation.
really happened,
Yes.
you know. So I don't know how much he will, you know, hold back, but we do know that previously he has spoken out about, you know, these two companies, and also he has also mentioned the names of Tom Moyane and Jonas Makwakwa. So I don't know what he means this time when he says he's going to hold back, whether or not he's going to mention those names, and how, of course, these companies had helped in aiding state capture. So, I mean, I think we have to wait and see what his testimony will be about, but I know for sure that previously the names of Tom Moyane and the names of Jonas Makwakwa has previously, you know, come out from the statements that he's made. In
the bigger scheme of things, what is the significance of Peter Hain's, Lord Peter Hain's testimony?
Well, I think it's important, Desiree, just to highlight the fact that, you know, beyond South Africa, because what we do know now is what happened in South Africa and how the Guptas, you know, through their influence on President Jacob Zuma, their friend, had apparently looted, you know, state coffers, had looted money from SOEs. But now we've also heard of the angle of money laundering and how international banks were used to launder money. For example, you know, how money from the Freda Dairy Farm was laundered through Dubai, and how it eventually came back, the 30 million, to fund the Gupta wedding. But now we're getting, you know, an even bigger sense of how internationally, you know, some companies were involved in either, you know, aiding or protecting state capture.
Quite reputable companies.
Quite reputable companies.
I mean, I look at the Hogan Lovells building in Sandton. It's quite a huge, can't miss building, and it gives you a sense of the magnitude or the scale of the company.
Indeed. So not only that, we had KPMG that was also mentioned in this, and Bell Pottinger. So this is sort of like now bringing in the international aspect of how, you know, the international companies were either used, or how some of them maybe might have been aware or not aware, but how they eventually aided this state capture project and what it meant at the time, and, you know, the noise that was made about it, whether they are aware or not aware. Of course, those are some of the issues that we expect to hear from him.
Yeah. Do we know anything as of now in relation to the testimony of former President Jacob Zuma? Is he coming back? When is he coming back?
Well, Desiree, there's no indication at this point when he will be coming back before the State Capture Commission. We do know that, you know, he was scheduled to appear for those 2 weeks that were set aside. The commission itself has not, you know, said anything about his appearance, and I think, you know, there is a question of whether or not the commission will be looking at, you know, subpoenaing, to send a subpoena to him to maybe compel him to come back to the State Capture Commission. But at this point, there has been no talk of that as well. We're yet to find out, you know, what the plan is with regards to that, and I'm sure they will communicate in, you know, the relevant time, closer to the time, what will happen to it. But at this stage, we have no indication of whether he will be coming back or not. But certainly, it doesn't look like if he is going to come back, it will be this year.
Manqoba, just remind us in terms of the rules of the Commission as we're talking about international firms in terms of Lord Peter Hain's testimony. How will this impact them? Like we've been saying with other testimonies that the Hawks need to act, the local law enforcement agencies need to act on the testimony. In terms of international firms, what's the recourse? Or how can they make up, or how can they be made to face the law, so to speak?
Well, Desiree, we know that, of course, the Commission, if somebody is implicated, it sends out a notice to inform that particular person, or, you know, those people that are implicated, that they've been implicated and how exactly they've been implicated. So I think, judging from the evidence that Peter Lord Hain will deliver with regards to the extent of complicity or the extent of how these companies had, played an active role in either aiding state capture. From there, I think the Commission itself could maybe be compelled or, take a position where it can make some sort of, a recommendation as to what needs to happen.
Yep.
And maybe, some of the things that could be considered is for, of course, the governments of those countries to take certain actions or, for international policing units to actually investigate this matter. So at this stage, it's not clear whether there will be a need for any recourse or whether he will simply just be mentioning or, giving his opinion of how these companies had aided in state capture.
I'm in a conversation with Manqoba Mchunu. He is our colleague who has been covering the State Capture Commission, particularly related to today's expected testimony of Lord Peter Hain, but a Gupta-owned property in Johannesburg is from which the ANC Secretary-general Ace Magashule's son Tshepiso Magashule was evicted, will go on auction today, according to Park Village Auctions. This will be the first of several Saxonwold-based Gupta-owned properties to be auctioned. The controversial family are at the heart of state capture allegations, along with their friend, former President Jacob Zuma. According to Property24.com figures, residential houses in the area fetch between 3 to 20 million. What do we know about this story, Manqoba?
Well, of course, you recall that, the Guptas, we know that the Guptas themselves had a compound in Saxonwold. But I think from the state capture a testimony of Duduzane Zuma, we also learned that, Duduzane Zuma himself also had a house in Saxonwold, and so did the son of the then Tshepiso Magashule had a house in Saxonwold. So at this point, the information that we know is that these houses belonged to Duduzane and Tshepiso. Yeah. But, it's interesting to find out if they're saying that these were Gupta properties that actually, were linked to the Guptas themselves. So I guess, interesting as well to find.
And also, if the properties are being auctioned and not sold, it means that the proceeds of the sales will not go necessarily to Tshepiso or to Duduzane or the Guptas.
It seems that that is the way. If something is being auctioned, Desiree, that means that the bank is trying to recoup the monies that have not been paid. So the indication is that obviously the banks are trying to recoup the monies that that were owed to them, and obviously they will have to keep those proceeds to them.
So the testimony of the Lord Peter Hain today, how will it affect the testimony of former President Jacob Zuma?
Well, I'm not quite sure at this stage, Desiree, how it could have an effect.
But I think said previously that these people were connected to the former president.
Those are the allegations that they've made. And of course...
All right, I'm going to ask you to hold on to your thoughts. Let's cross to Griselda now. A very good morning to you, Griselda. What can you tell us?
Well, a very good morning to you, Desiree. At 11 o'clock this morning, the first of the Gupta assets is going on auction here in Saxonwold in Johannesburg. These are live pictures outside the house here. You would know that this is just one of the properties belonging to the controversial Gupta family that is going on auction, to be auctioned by these auctioneers. We'll just take you inside, Desiree, for a moment here. And you would know, of course, that this is a 1,119 square meter luxury home, which comprises of where we're going through now, an entrance foyer, and my colleague Kwazimanzi going towards the kitchen here. There is also 3 bedrooms, as well as 2 bathrooms, one which has an ensuite. Where we are now is the kitchen, and we'll move towards the other direction now. Here towards my right, you'll see from the kitchen here heading through this foyer to where you would find one of the lounge areas, Desiree. We're just trying to give you a glimpse of exactly what we're talking about here, Desiree, before we get some context into exactly why we are here. A fireplace in this particular room, which is one of the lounge areas that you will see here. And you sort of move into another one here towards my right as well, which is one of the other lounge areas as well. So this house also comprising of a covered patio, which you would see very shortly, and a garden as well as a swimming pool. So the property also features a double garage and some staff quarters. We can't show you all of that as we move throughout the house itself, but you would know, of course, that the reason why we're here, Desiree, is that the auction date had been set for this Gupta-owned property to be placed on auction, and it was also reported that this is where the son of the ANC Secretary-general Ace Magashule was recently evicted, and it appears that there were some business rescue practitioners who were overseeing a matter pertaining to one of the controversial companies that was placed under a business rescue, and this is one of the houses that is to be auctioned off, and this one being here in Saxonwold, not the usual palatial one that we often would take you to, where the Guptas themselves had been staying before they had left South Africa. The room will the rooms as well. We come towards this direction here, and you see a bit of furniture placed here in this room, this being one of the bedrooms, Desiree. The ensuite here towards this direction, my colleague Kwazimanzi will show you this, and you would recall, of course, with the Gupta family being at the center of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. This is the first of several Saxonwold-based Gupta-owned properties that are set to be auctioned. And here, this one will get underway at 11 o'clock. What we do understand is that there will be viewings that start now at about 9:30, and my understanding, Desiree, is that in this particular neighborhood you would find R3 million, and I guess at 11 o'clock we'll know exactly how much this house will go under the hammer for. So this being the first of the properties the assets belonging to the Gupta family, which will be auctioned. Another room here, and another bathroom towards this direction here as well. Before then, you head out to see if I can get this open. Get it open. All right, we've been trying. Apologies if the lighting is not too good, Desiree. We've been trying to switch the electricity on here, but it doesn't seem that it is connected at this stage. But once again, you would know that the Gupta family being at the center of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, that auction date itself had been set. It's here today, and there had been some concern about the fact that these auctioneers were not able to have this house auctioned at the date they were supposed to, because there had been an occupant in here believed to be the son of the Secretary-General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, and the auctioneers on record having said that they had some challenges removing the occupant from this house, 1,119 square meter luxury home belonging to the Guptas, going on auction at 11 o'clock this morning. Desiree.
Thank you very much for that update, Criselda.